It's really a pleasure to have you all here. Thank you for joining us back in the room for the next plenary session. My name is Kim Coupounas. I'm really honored and privileged to be here. Many of my great heroes in this lifetime are in this room. Never assembled has there been such a room full of brilliance and heart. And I'm really pleased to be with three amazing panelists who will be sharing their wisdom with us over the next hour. To my left, we have Laszlo from Fordham University, Case Western Reserve University, Michael Pirson from Fordham University, and Heidi Cuppari from Anastasia Impact and Dream Tank. And we're going to dig into business. We're going to spend about 10 minutes each or so sharing a little bit about what we do in the world, what inspires us about the power of business to change the future and create the world the regenerative future that we all want and know that our children deserve. And then we'll do a little bit of dialogue and open it up for questions. So before we begin, I wanted to spend about 10 minutes sharing with you something that I consider to be the most exciting thing going on in business today, and that is a mobilization of people around the world who are trying to reshape business leadership and the conscious leaders that are leading this new era of impact-based businesses, and a group of organizations that are trying to reshape the economy to get businesses to choose better. And before I go in, just a little bit about me. I'm working for this awesome little nonprofit, the little engine that could, called B-Lab. But before that, I was a mission-driven entrepreneur. My husband and I founded an outdoor apparel and equipment company called Go Light. Thank you. It was a great labor of love, and we had about a 20-year run. The downturn in the economy unfortunately ended our business. There were a lot of factors that went into it, but sustainability was not one of the reasons that it went down. And I'm so proud of what we were able to accomplish during that time. We went from about 3% environmentally preferred materials in our products to about over 90% by weight by about 2012, and in short order, like 2 years, we radically transformed our product line, and we had an A+ verified GRI report, and we're one of the earliest certified B Corps, so I really was proud of that. And the other thing I'm really proud of is the fact that I spent a good deal of my time while I was at Go Light serving on the Outdoor Industry Association's Trade Association board, and was chairman of the board from 2006 to 2008. And during my chairmanship, we launched what is called the OIA Sustainability Working Group. So talk about exciting things happening in business. This group, which started in a bar in Salt Lake City with dirt floors, I swear, led to a coalition of the largest textile manufacturers in the world now that are working together with the OIA Sustainability Working Group and the Sustainable Apparel Coalition on a joint set of standards and practices to reduce the footprint in our supply chains. Wow. Yep. So we're going to talk a little bit about the B Corp movement that I'm a part of, and there are many B Corps in the room. If you're part of a B Corporation, can you raise your hand so that people in the audience know to seek you out later? These are amazing companies and led by very conscious leaders. In fact, many of the for-profit companies that we heard that received thanks from Hunter at the beginning, Guayaki, Conscious Coffee, I'm forgetting a few. First Affirmative, a long list. Most of them are B Corps. So you're being well taken care of by great companies. So, capitalism, right? We lots of great things have come from it. Incredible standards of living, elevated education, greater freedoms, more democracies. Lots of good things have come from it, but we all know, and the reason we're here is to see and to recognize and try to create something else from the negative things that have come from capitalism. We have hyperconsumption that's causing epidemics of anxiety and stress and depression, and hyperconsumption was leading to all kinds of other negative externalities, a word that I despise, by the way. You can talk about the extinction of species that we haven't seen since the dinosaurs disappeared, to biotoxicity and the trash and the plastics that we're dumping into the oceans, et cetera, et cetera. And then we have a litany of greed, fraud, and abuse that would make Genghis Khan blush. And we have the greenwashers, companies that say they're doing well, that they're doing good, but honestly, they're just really good marketers. And then we have the notion of shareholder primacy, the notion that a company's only job in the world is to make a profit. Well, now, we all know that's a false god, but unfortunately, by custom and in many instances by law, it's upheld as a way of doing business, that this is what the job of corporation is, and it's really not to take care of their other key stakeholders. So it's really getting in the way of good businesses trying to do the right thing. So what we have from a capitalism standpoint is system failure. You know, if you look at every leading indicator, the concentration of wealth in the hands of the few, the fact that we've well passed the 350 parts per million, the fact that the next generation doesn't even consider themselves capitalists, they really don't even relate to the notion of capitalism. So we have system failure. And it requires systems change. And if you're looking at capitalism, we really need to figure out how to change so many layers of business to make it work differently. And we need viable alternatives to fix it. So what if we could harness the power of business? Now, we all know how much it changes our lives, from the chairs we sit on to the cars we drive. What if we could harness the power of business to solve social and environmental problems instead of just creating new ones? What if companies competed to be the best for the world instead of the best in the world? What if our founding entrepreneurs understood what the true purpose of business is, like Yvon Chouinard from Patagonia? What if our multinational public market CEOs understood that they can challenge sacred cows, like quarterly reporting, and say, no, I'm sorry, I'm not going to do that anymore, it's creating bad outcomes, like Paul Pullman from Unilever, who is committed to becoming a B Corp, by the way. What if our startup entrepreneurs were willing to build in stakeholder interest into their legal DNA from the get-go, like the founders of Kickstarter? So what we're seeing in these entrepreneurs and these business leaders is a historic global shift. It really is happening. And we have in our hands the pieces and the seeds to create this future that we want in business. Now, this is not some hippie, we're in Boulder. I'm from Boulder. Well, I'm from the East Coast originally, but I've been in Boulder for 20 years, and I would consider myself at many levels a hippie. But this is not some hippie ideal, right? This is back to the roots of capitalism. If you asked Henry Ford what the true purpose of business was, it was, yeah, to make great cars and to make money, and it was also to create a good job for people and to make it affordable for them to buy the products that they made. So he was kind of the original conscious capitalism. He played the original payer of the living wage. So we're kind of going back to the roots of what it means to create a business, why businesses exist. Now, B-Lab is not the only one working on this. There are many great organizations, universities around the world that are concentrating, heavily focused on fixing a broken system. If you haven't seen a fantastic report by the Ford Foundation and Monitor that came out from Oxford Said School, it's called The State and Direction of Inclusive Capitalism, and it talks about all these organizations and how they're working to change the system. From networks and convening leaders to research thought leaders, building movements, policy advocacy, standards, business education, public engagement, and advisory. So how is B-Lab doing it? We really take a systemic approach to trying to be one of the instigators of this change. We're building first a market infrastructure, performance standards, speaking the same language, making sure that we are talking the same language when we talk about what is a good business, that we have a legal framework to enable business leaders to do the right thing and not just be beholden to profit, and we're trying to create a unifying brand, and that's the B Corp certification. So the first step out of that gate, up this long climb up the mountain, was to build a community of thousands of credible leaders, the companies like Patagonia and the B Corps in this room, to say, hey, look, it's possible to do well, to be a high-growth, profitable company, or just a healthy company, while also taking care of your stakeholders. Next, we wanted to create tools to make it easier for millions of companies to start making those changes, and that includes the standards and getting people on that path of metrics and evaluation of their impact so they can start making improvements. Step 3 will be to inspire the consumers to choose differently, to use the power of their wallet in every purchase that they make to choose these companies, because if these companies can't survive because nobody buys from them, we're doomed. We can't solve this problem. Now, this last crux pitch is a multi-decade kind of scale question. How do we take a nascent community of really great businesses like B Corps and grow the crap out of that community and also inspire new companies that don't have to be B Corps, but it would sure be great if they acted like B Corps so that we can get to this notion of shared and durable prosperity or well-being for all. So we have about 2,000 B Corps in the world in 50 countries, 130 industries, and the unifying aspect of all these business leaders is that they want to use their business as a force for good. It's many of the brands you'd know and love, and I'll highlight two just to kind of get tangible about what these time? Okay. All right, so New Belgium and Grayston. Grayston says they make brownies to employ people. They don't employ people to make brownies. They employ people who have trouble getting a job otherwise. Many of them are post-incarceration, and it's an amazing company that gives every dollar of profit back into the Grayston Foundation, which is focused on workforce development. And New Belgium Brewing, for example, a local company. None of these companies, no B Corps, not a single company on the planet, in my estimation, is truly regenerative, but many are on their way. New Belgium's a great example. They dedicate a huge amount of effort into making sure that their environmental footprint is low, they're employee-owned, they have an incredible culture, they give back tremendously to the communities in which they operate. So I'm already out of time. You can tell I'm very passionate about this topic. So I'm gonna rip through, by the way, Grayston Bakery makes the brownies and Ben & Jerry's ice cream, which is also a B Corp. You should support both of those companies. So how do we encourage it all? So big scale questions for you to be thinking about during the session, and when we talk, hopefully you'll be thinking about them. How do we encourage all businesses to act like a B Corp? There's 125 million on the planet. We have only 2,000, plus another couple thousand that are like B Corps but don't have the certification. There's lots of work being done around impact governance. We've passed laws around the United States. There's now passed in 33 states, including Kansas this past week, for the existence of a new corporate form called the Benefit Corporation. It exists here in Colorado and California. There's over 4,000 benefit corps and over 800 here in Colorado. The G8 task force put forward a mandate saying that they believe that benefit corporations should be passed in countries all around the world. So we're making progress. I'm going to zip through these. There's lots of companies using the impact assessment to encourage their members, like the B team, and, oh, sorry, these are investors. These are investors actively seeking out B Corps and benefit corps to invest in. There's over 60,000 companies using the B impact assessment, so that's a great sign. They're not B Corps, but they're measuring and improving their impacts. The B impact assessment is free online, and when companies measure their impacts, they improve. When you know where you are and you realize there's a big gap between what you could be, you make change. Okay, we're gonna zip through this. These are institutions. If you're an institution and you are tapped into a network of companies, you can use the B impact assessment as a way to get them on the journey towards a positive business model. So the second big challenge from a scale standpoint is how do we change the consumer mindset? Some of that is building collective voice, and we will hopefully have a collective mandate or something to say to consumers coming out of this that will hopefully unify us. This is how B Corps show up together at retail all over the world. They're showing up as a community of businesses doing good. They're using it on their windows, their packaging, their business cards, whatever they can tell the story of good business, they do. Skip through this, and I'll end with this. This was really meaningful to our team, and to our entire movement. An article came out in Fast Company last year that listed the 20 moments that mattered in the last 20 years. One of them was the Human Genome Project, one was the iPhone, one was Uber, and one was the B Corp movement. And there were 16 others, obviously. Very engaged on campuses, and I'll end there. So, I tell the B Corp movement story not because I think it's the only solution. I do think it's a viable solution, and I think there are many other things in the works. And with that, I'm going to pass it to someone who's an expert in that, Laszlo.
Thank you, Kim. Kim, your excitement and enthusiasm is contagious and inspiring us. Hello to all of you. First of all, a little plug, I guess, for the Cleveland Global Forum, June 14th to 16th. We will have Greystone Bakery brownies.
Reason to go.
Reason to go. So welcome again. So we've heard that we urgently need a new narrative. We heard that this morning. We've heard that throughout the summit. And really the question, which Kim was also raising, is how do we scale that? How do we make a new narrative stick? How do we make it go beyond this type of community so that we're reaching, not just thousands, but millions, tens of millions of people in a new narrative? So what I want to do in the next few minutes is point to consciousness as the root of who we are, how we think about things, how we behave towards others and nature, and the actions we take in the world. And in fact, what I want to propose in the next few minutes is that transforming our consciousness is the most powerful trim tab. I guess this has become the latest jargon. Trim tab, right? Is that the thing? Yeah, okay. Is the most powerful trim tab in unlocking the kind of actions that we are all committed to doing. And many of these actions in the working groups we have around the room, I want to suggest that the root cause, in a way, is transforming our consciousness. So what is consciousness? Consciousness, first of all, well, scientists define consciousness as the awareness by the mind of itself and the world we live in. The awareness by the mind of itself and the world we live in. That awareness, what is that awareness that we have today? Well, I want to suggest to you that there are two very distinct, different forms of awareness. And ask yourself where you are on this spectrum. Because in fact, there are two forms of awareness, and these two forms of awareness are at war with each other. So the last 300 years, really largely supported by the natural and social sciences, have led us to see the world, to understand the world, and who we are as human beings in terms of being separate and selfish. Utility maximizing individuals who live in a cold, spiritless universe that is somehow subject to these forces, the gravity, electromagnetic, strong and weak nuclear forces that are moving us inexorably towards death, meaningless death. And that is really, that is based on what science has told us, that is what we have come to believe is the reality of the world. So again, when I talk about consciousness, I'm talking about something that's at a deeper level than just a story or narrative. It's really the ontology, and again, I apologize, I don't want to use jargony words, but it is about how we experience reality, which is what academics call our beliefs about ontology itself. Now, the good news is that there is a very different type of consciousness emerging. Instead of being one that is grounded in the idea that we are separate, selfish human beings, it's one that suggests that, in fact, human beings are deeply connected to, not just as a whole human being connected to themselves, but deeply connected to others, to nature, to future generations, and even, as many traditions have held it through history around the world, to our ancestors as well. And there is a large and growing body of scientific evidence, new sciences, that support this view that reality itself is deeply connected, and that once we experience that level of connectedness, it changes how we think about who we are and the actions we take. So, whether it's quantum physics with this idea of quantum entanglement, at the finest structure, smallest level of the universe, we know that particles are what physicists call entangled, and they're entangled across great distances, and that there are also these effects called non-locality that macro science is not able to explain. So things are correlated across distance. There's also a growing area called quantum biology and the biology of belief that suggests that who we are is very affected by the beliefs we hold, and that we are very connected biologically. So it's not just at a quantum level, it's also at the mesobiological level, that there's a level of mutualism and connectedness that we don't have, that we have thought didn't exist. And then, epigenetics and evolutionary biology, cosmology, and even recent research into consciousness itself. I don't know if you've seen it in some of the popular articles out there. There's a raging debate, actually, between the so-called physicalists who think that our consciousness is just a product of our brain, like the firing of neurons and axons, and that we have so many of these that, at some level of complexity, poof, suddenly consciousness emerges. I don't know if you noticed, but that sound, poof, it doesn't sound very scientific, does it? But there is also a growing body of evidence, and by scientists led by people like David Chalmers from Australia, and the neurophysiologist Stuart Hameroff, the English mathematician Sir Roger Penrose, who are suggesting that, in fact, consciousness lies outside the brain and that our brain is tapping into it, that consciousness is a property of all life. And that is something that goes back to much earlier spiritual traditions that have always suggested, or many have suggested, that behind the physical world lies an ineffable world of consciousness, of vibrations, of something out of which the physical world comes. And funnily enough, these new scientific findings are now reinforcing or converging on this idea. So imagine just for a second that we're connected to ourselves. And I don't mean this metaphorically. I don't mean this emotionally. I don't mean that I like you guys and I feel connected to you because I like you guys. I mean, in the language of a quantum physicist, that we are actually physically connected by an information and energy field, and that we are what they call just excitations of the field. Okay? Now, if we experience the world like this, with this level of connectedness, I want to suggest that we might view otherness in a different way. We might view our relationship with others, our relationship with nature in different ways. And that if we can, when we engage executives or people in positions of power about the need to be more compassionate, to be more connected, we can overlay the new science to support the reasoning that we have a case, a much stronger case than we have had in the past. So that it's not just my beliefs. Oh yeah, I believe we should be more connected. Hey, guess what? The nature of physical reality is a unitary reality. It's a deeply interconnected and coherent reality. So there's a lot more in the sciences I would like to share, but in this limited time I can't do that. But I want to also say one other thing. It's much, much more than just the question of this theoretical debate about the nature of reality. It has to do, and this is what excites me as someone in the business world. There is a growing body of applied research that shows that there are practices we can each have in our lives and routines that we can have that connect us to ourself, others, and nature. Whether it's mindfulness meditation and some of these esoteric Eastern things which turn off many people, but also it can be going for a walk in nature. It can be music. It can be prayer. It can be Hunter, when we talked about it, said for her it's going off and riding her horse. So I think, I don't want to speak anymore in the work I'm doing about mindfulness practices or reflective practice. I want to talk about practices of connectedness. And I want to ask each of you here today, what practices do you have in your life that help make you whole at the end of every day? Do you have practices that in some ways give you a sense of being able to heal what's happening to you at a time in history when we're constantly fragmented, jumping from one electronic screen to the next, one task to the next, overwhelmed with a constant number of things that usually are about using our neocortex, and especially the left the left part of the brain. We need to return to practices that make us whole, because when we are whole human beings, we are more likely to be able to make decisions in business and elsewhere that care for ourselves, care for others, nature, and future generations. Thank you.
Thank you. It's hard to follow that one, but I think what I wanted to sort of add to some of that thinking is, first, I think science might not be the problem in itself, or our understanding of the world may be, the way that we see ourselves, who we are as human beings. I think that sort of speaks to the consciousness level in some way. And I work with a network that's called the Humanistic Management Network, because we think what needs to shift, finance and business and economics needs to shift, but the way we organize needs to shift. The way we see ourselves as human beings, and the way we organize. So those two things, and what we're saying is that the neolibs didn't get it all wrong, okay? I think just bashing them is not very helpful. What we need to understand is what did they speak to, what made it attractive, and what legitimized it. And the only document that they actually produced at Mont Pelerin that they could agree on 10 days conversing amongst each other was dignity and liberty. Or they called it then freedom, okay? They have reframed it into liberty. But I think we need to sort of honor that, and we need to understand why that may matter. And I'm saying that it is about organizing at a level myself with others, and then maybe business too, but institutions, finance, whatever. It is sort of at the core of how we see ourselves and how do we relate with each other. And I think that that concept of dignity has been thrown out for some reasons, and it may be worthwhile to bring it back. Dignity basically means that it has something has inherent value. It can therefore not be priced. So when you think about that, what we have done and what the neolibs have done with that concept of dignity, it didn't work because what they have done is they have elevated the market and what anthropologists call the market pricing mechanism. And the market pricing mechanism has been in place, has allowed us to survive as a species in many ways. We can reformulate how we use market pricing. But I think what's also important is to understand that why we have survived is that we had alternative modes of organizing. And I'm going to throw them out because I find that interesting in some way, that the literature on this is very clear and you can replicate it in many different ways. But oftentimes when we talk about narrative, we're sort of stuck in the market, we're talking business, and yes, we need to be hard and we need to be doing these and these and these things. And that's all good, and I think there's lots of ways that we can improve on the current market pricing mechanism. But I also want to be clear that I think we are not serving ourselves well if we leave out the other principles of organizing that seem to be universal, that have helped us to survive. And what the anthropologists call it is, one, communal sharing, right? That's the family, that's the community. That's, I think, what the progressives in typical ways sort of embrace in many different ways, but that's where dignity lives in different places where it's not a market price, etc. And we want to create this, and I think Stuart Wallace was talking about this. I think this may be interesting for the kind of movement building in a way that that we are more aware of the way and where we have communal sharing. And the family that has been left out as an entity of communal sharing in the most of the progressive narratives, I think, might need to be reclaimed. The freedom narrative might also be needed to reclaim. And there is something that sort of is awkward about, I think, an alternative other mechanism of organizing. It's called authority ranking, okay? So most liberals, if I want to say, have problems with authority, right? And that's why we don't converge very easily. But there's legitimate authority that has helped us to survive. And I think reclaiming that's not a market mechanism, right? Reclaiming and being aware of legitimate authority can possibly help. What do I mean about that? Or what do they say? It's the authority of wisdom, of insight, the authority of expertise, right? We're throwing science out the window. I mean, you can see the talk shows. It's basically pay to play, as Hunter is saying. But if we are more focused on what actual expertise is, what actual wisdom is, maybe we can sort of reclaim some of that that we have lost in that whole conversation. The authority of law or legal principles that have helped us to sort of make sure that authority is legitimate, that's being thrown out the window in many ways. And it is because of the market principle, okay? And I think we need to undermine the market principle to that degree that we can reclaim that legitimate authority, and we need to put that in place. And the third one is equity matching. All of this sounds jargony to the Lord. I'm apologizing, but I'm thinking it's helpful to decipher some of these other mechanisms. And that equality matching principle is the one that gave us what we can call democracy. One person, one vote, whatever. Yeah, it's where you can see dignity in place. The value of the person is there. It's not the value of the price or the market, et cetera, that they can bring to the table. I think we have been in fundamental violation in many places, including businesses, where that principle does not matter. If we rethought how we organize business on that democratic principle, then we would elevate a lot of the stories of existing organizations like the cooperatives and others that have been working, but that are completely under the radar. And I'm speaking as a business school professor, because we're not teaching these cases. We're not even allowed to teach these cases. So the stories never go out. But I think we need to reclaim that that is a very valid organizing principle and has helped us to survive. And I think that's sort of the kind of contribution that I think I want to share for now. As humanistic management scholars, we have a tagline. We're trying to sort of adhere to some of the marketing We're saying what's important is that we protect dignity and that we promote well-being. Those are the organizing principles. And that can happen in all kinds of institutions. And we can do this through all these four ways of organizing, but I think we need to have a more conscious effort of putting the market pricing principles into its place, to balance them. They're good for what they're supposed to do, but they're oftentimes undermining dignity at the core, okay? And they're therefore not helpful with creation of well-being. Okay, I'll leave it at that, thank you.
On to Heidi.
Hi everyone, I'm Heidi Cuppari, and this is an amazing gathering, and I love all of the conversations about narrative and consciousness and changing the culture and systems change. And a little bit of background as to why I may be sitting here is that I've been in the field of social impact investing and social enterprise for 13 years through Acumen, IDE, and UBS, working with a whole range of individuals on activating their money and also business skills to create social change. And through that experience, one of the things that I learned was that me, as a human being, was really mattered that I love listening to people and I love seeing what brings people's heart and soul alive. And so consciousness and awareness from a young age, I realized that I was someone that felt so much joy. And I practiced connectedness through laughter and through play and through really seeing what brings people to come alive, what makes your heart big and wild. And that was really the core essence of every conversation that I had and the most successful relationships I had to raise large amounts of money, to launch movements, to launch ventures. For me, it always started with, who are you? And what is it you see? And what are you so passionate about that you want to see in the world? And that business and finance are tools. And in fact, they're really energy, right? So if we look at ourselves and say, who am I? And what is it that I'm here for? What am I here for? And then what tools and what energy can I flow in alignment with that? And so I left UBS about 3 years ago. I was on a wealth management team focused on ESG and impact. And to start Anastasia Impact really was to start that conversation and really engage people more on an interpersonal level around their relationship with money, and money being energy of something they could flow in alignment with who they are. But a lot of us have encountered limiting beliefs around money, people telling us how to be, where to go, especially people who inherit money, especially young people who inherit money, and especially women who inherit money, which, by the way, I don't know if it was mentioned yesterday, the largest wealth transfer is happening to women and millennials, and it's $60 trillion is going into the hands of women and millennials over the next few generations. And so women and millennials, to this point, really have not engaged as much with our money and in the financial system. There's a lot of statistics that show that. And what I learned while at my time at UBS was the glazing over of, of the eyes when we start talking about, standard deviation, and we start talking about benchmarks. And I noticed that when we start talking about what they cared about and what are we doing, that's disruptive, that's different, that they want to invest in and they want to engage with, I realized the narrative could change to who are you and another deeper level. So what I do is help women and millennials and their families, I work with small groups, to really help them understand what that is and who they are. And a lot of healing comes from that. And then the advocacy is how can you actually make a difference and stand tall have confidence in your family. And that is to know the left brain, all the data and the statistics as well. So deeply seated in who you are, what you want to do, and then having data, skills, information to carry that out. So it's really the marrying of the left brain and the right brain, that connecting with people from the heart, who you are first, so you really have a deep connection with people. And the wall doesn't need to be up with finance. The wall, it doesn't need to have this mahogany desk between us. We can just break down all those barriers and really connect as human beings. And what I discovered also is what Kim was talking about, systemic change. We need systemic change. What is that? She also mentioned the mapping the human genome. Well, that is about collective impact. So when we're connected to ourselves, then we look at who can we connect with that also believes in what we believe in. And what are those major advancements for humanity that we really want to be a part of with other people? So I believe that the big leap forward and how we can really move mountains is collective impact for the systems change. There's been a lot of research. Harvard put out some research. They have an institute there, Stanford Social Innovation Review. Collective impact means that you have an organization, kind of like what we're doing here, and the organization that wants to be formed after this is to gather people to address all these different social challenges. And I believe a great framework for that is the Sustainable Development Goals. They are 193 out of 196 countries actually came forth with 17 goals for humanity and how we can actually stay on the planet. And I think it's a great framework, and it's a great framework to look at organizing ourselves around those advancements for humanity, and then bringing those groups of people together to carry out that big, hairy, audacious goal for the future and know who's on that team to do it. So just to recap, finance activating towards purpose and changing the money, transforming the money you have in the market into something that's more aligned, screening out what you don't believe in, aligning your foundation money. I know Donna probably talked about that more yesterday. And then it's also changing the system with your more flexible money. So the money in your portfolio that is alternatives, which can be invested in alternative hedge funds and all these different awesome things, but then also investing in systems change, collective impact. And now I'm going to take a damn stand for something even bigger. So thank you, Rob, for that. And I'm falling down here. Okay, I'm going to get back up. So the damn stand that I want to take even beyond that is that we are not listening to the world's best innovators. Kids, youth. We are not listening. We are not giving them a platform. The schools are serving an industrialist society, and none of those jobs are really going to be there when they graduate anyway. So what are we doing? What are we doing? We need to give them they are the ones who can say, like JFK, we are going to the moon. He did not know how they were going to get to the moon. He just said, we're going to the moon. So kids can say, I'm going to terraform other planets and create habitable atmospheres so that we can, reduce our dependence on Earth. Who's to say that kid's not going to come up with that? We need to listen and give a platform to the youth. That is how I believe we're going to catapult and catalyze and inspire everyone to change the narrative. That is how I believe we're going to break down walls. Because kids don't say, I'm right? That is the worst way to get a movement going, is saying, I'm right. Kids say, oh, well, just do this. Why wouldn't we just do this? And talk about consciousness. They come in with consciousness. They come in with all of this that we're sitting here trying to figure out. They come in naturally like that. And the more we wait for them to grow up, the more they encounter what we call dream crushers. So I started Dream Tank about a year ago as an answer to this, because I have 2 kids. And my daughter, Summer, is 11, and my son, Cody, is 8. And I was doing all this work and traveling around the world, talking about systems change and going to the developing world on behalf of IDE and learning all these things. And I would talk to them about what I was encountering. And the questions they would ask were brilliant. And I wasn't actually hearing those questions in some of these summits I was going to. And last year, I was on a panel at a family office conference in Palm Beach. And the moderator asked me, and I was there representing Anastasia Impact. The moderator asked me, if you had 1 year left to live, what would you do? And what just came out of my mouth was, I would start a think tank so we could listen to the kids' solutions to the world's problems. And I realized, uh-oh, I guess I have to go do that. And so I started an experiment last summer with a co-founder and my kids called Dream Tank. And a year later, it's been explosive. And we've launched 22 kid ventures addressing social problems. We've impacted about 600 kids in the Boulder Valley School District who are now being invited to dream big and come up with solutions through workshops, in-school innovation fairs. We've just said yes to everything. We've just done this massive experiment. And so that's really what I'm seeing, is that those questions and the way they see it are things that we've never even thought of, that we haven't even talked about yet. And the reason why I wanted to also speak to technology, and we talk about, it's kind of frustrating to see the youth, and maybe we see that we're losing the youth into games, into video games. I know that that's a fear. And one of the things that is an impact of not unleashing the dreams of kids is that we will lose them to video games where they can create new worlds, because they can't create new worlds in the real world because we're not giving them access to things they need to do. And so productive use of technology, mentorship, and entrepreneurial skills is what we give kids in Dream Tank. And what the major thing I want to say about Dream Crushers, we give them compassion for all of us who have forgotten how to dream. Let's be real. A lot of us have, and not the people here, because we're here dreaming together, right? But we want to change the narrative globally. And it's up to the kids. We tell them it's up to you guys to teach us to remember how to dream. And it's up to you to help us dream the future that we all want to live in. And when you encounter dream crushers are people who think you can't do it, who say, you're never going to make money doing that, you're too little, that's not possible. Or a lot of us in this room probably encountered that because when we were artists or musicians at a young age telling us we can't make money doing that. Well, we don't want the kids to have that. We want them to launch their dreams now. And so we are advocating dream launching and not dream crushing. Thank you.
I love it. Heidi, you're awesome. Is that a hopeful, exciting thing happening in the world right now? Thank you for that. So I'm going to pepper these guys with a couple of questions, and then we only have a little bit of time left, so we'll pass it out to the audience for your questions for this group. I'm going to start with you, Heidi, since we just heard that exciting story about Dream Tank. Thank you for the great work you're doing in the world. So we hear a lot of generalities about the millennials, and then what's the next generation called?
The Minecraft generation.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
So
Minecraft. Do you want me to say what Minecraft is? Does
Please
everyone
do.
know? Okay. So Minecraft is a game that you can create new worlds. And you get tools, skills, potions, all different kinds of things. And you can create your own world. And interestingly, there's 2 different templates you can create from. One is called survival, and one is called creative. Isn't that interesting? Maslow's hierarchy of needs built into a video game with kids just coming in. And in the survival world, they create their own houses, they make their own stoves, they have to actually kill animals and cook them to eat, and they learn how to do that. And creative, they can really do different things. They can create new worlds, like on bigger scales, really imagining the fantastic. And that's what this whole generation, it's probably be like 8 through 18, are really immersed with. So when you hear that, instead of imagining, oh, what is that video game? That's what they're doing.
wow, I'm not sure whether to be happy or sad hearing that they're called the Minecraft generation video game. But I am curious if you've heard are there generalities from your time spending time with these young people? Is there a worldview that they have that you think we should hear?
Their worldview is that we're all telling them how to think and what to do and where to go, and no one's listening to them. And I've heard that many, many times. And that when you ask them, what do you think and who you are matters and what you believe matters, it switches something on, and there's completely different experience you'll have with these kids. I really encourage anyone who has a kid in their life from, we work with 8 through 18. Our focus beginning is 8 through 14, asking them, what do you believe? Because they will have mind-blowing ideas that will completely blow you away. And the way they see the world is because they've come in with technology. Technology is not going away. The way they handle technology is we aren't allowing them to do it in a productive way because we're so scared of it. And I'm someone who was struggling against it all before I realized this all along. But they think in games. They think in fun. They think in creation. So when you address and you think about talking to them about games and empowering them and your beliefs, we don't actually need to use words like mindfulness or meditation or we talk about Jedi powers. You need Jedi powers to create the future. You need to go on a mission to create the future. You need courage to create the future. You need to overcome obstacles. And those are things they respond to. They don't respond to words without action either. So, and they don't necessarily believe that, what I've also seen is they don't believe the system we've created is good. So they're actually think that a lot of us, sad to say, are a lot of hypocrites. And they don't believe in listening to us a lot anymore and what we have to say. So that is one generality I've noticed.
Thanks, Heidi. So I think that's reflective of a truth in that we are separated. Chris, you talked about the fact that we're biologically, energetically connected. So how did we, as a species, get so separated, so disconnected from our true essence? And what can we do to reverse that?
Well, I think we've been under the sway of science and beliefs, many of them religious beliefs, for a very long time, telling us that we are, as Stuart Mill said, we're utility maximizing individuals, and that wealth is good, and that we are that the physical reality, when we look at a carpet or a chair, it's made up of atoms. And these atoms are governed by some basic forces, but these forces are invisible, and that much of space is empty. And of course, we know now with understanding of dark matter, and we understand that there are forces we can't yet explain that link objects at great distances. So anyway, I think we are born into a world where we're told, hey, we're individuals, we're bounded individuals, as the existentialists have said. And a lot of the social sciences, particularly in psychology, up until 20 years ago, We studied individual human beings, and we studied what was wrong with them, and the pathologies of the mind, the diseases of the body. And now that's changing too. What we're doing is we're studying what is it that can create wellness in an individual? What is it that can create a sense of flourishing? What happens when the mind is working particularly well? What is a whole person experience like? So in a very short period of time, there's a lot of change going on. And that change is all going in the direction of reinforcing the fact that we are relational beings. There's a wonderful book, by the way, by a professor at Haverford College. His name is Ken Gergen, and he wrote a book called Relational Being. Worth reading. I think it's worth reading because it's really well grounded in the research. And none of this is completely a new idea, but we are seeing a resurgence of wanting to now start viewing who we are in relationship terms and seeing ourselves as part of nature, not that nature is there as a playground for our taking.
Thank you. We only have 5 minutes left, so I'm not going to ask you, Michael. I'm going to let the audience ask you a question. What questions do you have for the panel?
Thank you. My name is Beatrice. I'm from South Africa. I'm a metaphysical science student. I'm doing my master's research. That's why I'm here. And I'm listening to what you're saying about who we are and what children want. And to not rattle anyone, I just want to add to what you've said. If we become real with ourselves and start realizing that we've identified with our bodies and that we need to bring in the reality of what life is about, and that we cannot separate metaphysics from the solutions that we are trying to reach, and realizing that children are incarnated intelligence, reincarnated intelligence, we are not about to reach our solutions. Question is, how are you integrating this knowledge and the findings that you have done into what all of us are trying to achieve?
Smart to say, so I'm sorry. Maybe you want to use them.
Oh.
Oh, no.
How are you integrating all the knowledge, the knowledge of consciousness and in how am I guess I can answer that.
I can,
I don't know if you wanna answer
I
that.
can say a few things about that. There are a lot of, if I could use the term, hardcore scientists. These are people with PhD, MD degrees at the top universities who historically wouldn't be caught near anything that sounds like it's, outside the established paradigm. And there are a lot of them that are starting to say, we can't explain so much what we see, for example, in near-death experiences. We can't explain the brilliance of children at the age of 3 or 4. There are many examples of children that have talents and that have abilities and that have knowledge that cannot be explained at that very early age and often get suppressed, unfortunately. And so the idea of possibly reincarnation, the idea that we're spiritual beings, the idea that we tap into a universal field of consciousness, and that when we are born, we are also drawing on this universal field of consciousness, is actually moving more into mainstream science. And so there's an excellent book, I would strongly recommend it, by a Stanford University professor named Elizabeth Mayer, who wrote Extraordinary Knowing. And she died a few years ago. She died shortly after she wrote it. But she took a Western scientist's view of the skepticism that all this, reincarnation and all, when you hear these things, people go, oh yeah, okay, he's one of those people. But you know what? There's a lot in science now that simply cannot be explained with conventional science. These are called anomalies, scientific anomalies. And people like Dean Radin and Ken Wilber and many others are starting to suggest that there is a new paradigm of science emerging that will accept some of these ideas, that human beings, you can call them reincarnated, or you can call them are tapping into a spirit world, and that when we die, we don't actually die. Our bodies may die, but who we are goes back into this field, the spirit field. And I think if we see this, then it will also change how we act in the world. If this sounds metaphysical to you, I beg to differ. This is directly related to how we can expect people to behave in terms of caring for the environment, caring for communities, caring for their children.
I'll mention a more practical answer to the question you asked, and that is, I think one of the most exciting trends in business has been referenced here today, and that is the growth in mindfulness practice in business. And not only these two schools, but universities around the world are seeing this as an essential element of what they're teaching now. Naropa University here in Boulder is one of the leading proponents of this, and they teach deep practice and bring in business leaders from around the world. And it's interesting, there's a fantastic report that Hunter and Natural Capital Solutions puts out called Sustainability Pays, and it's all the best research out there about why businesses choose sustainable business practices, because it's raises your stock price and it produces more profits, et cetera. There's business reasons why you should invest in system. Well, now they're realizing that mindfulness pays. And so there's companies investing in that, and if you don't have a mindfulness practice or someone who can help you with that in your company, I would encourage you to do so. Okay. Question right here. I'll hold the mic.
Okay, thanks. Lonnie Gamble from Maurice University Management. And I wanted to ask Chris about this idea of holism. And seems like the intellectual exploration of holism isn't enough to make the change we want. And then there's this kind of practical direct experience of holism. We have thousands of years of many different experiences that you mentioned. Could you talk a little bit about the relationship between the intellectual understanding of holism and the experience of it, and how they both work to create change?
That's a great question, and I love it because what I've noticed is that in the West, we've tended to approach these things conceptually and through language. And just to make it very simple, in the Southern Hemisphere and in the East, people approach these questions through direct experience. They approach ultimate truths through practice and through experience. And I think it's only when we, all of us collectively, and certainly those of us in positions of power, can have practices in our life where we experience wholeness, that you're going to start seeing results, so that it's not just conceptual. And wholeness is the word that I think is the key to the whole thing. Because I like B Corps, don't get me wrong. I like social entrepreneurs, but you know what? I don't think that they're yet there. I don't think they've crossed the ontological divide. I think they still operate from a place of caring, which is caring, I care for others. There's separateness there. And being a force for good, there's somebody who's doing the good, and there's a recipient of the good. Okay? In wholeness, we don't think that way. In wholeness, we create value that is holistic because that's who we are.
Michael?
I want to say something slightly contrarian, just because I think we should honor science, okay, and we should honor the Western traditions, and we should honor for what is good about it, and not sort of possibly escape to other worlds. And you were saying, yes, great that kids want to go to a new world and dream these dreams. I think, well, if that's necessary, then we have completely failed. I think we're decent as human beings. We have survived so far. So let's rely on that. We have what it takes between our ears. So let's use that, even if it's imperfect. And if somebody knows that something is perfect, okay, then please provide it as a conversation starter. But that's sort of, I think, an ongoing conversation. I'm a little bit skeptical about just sort of saying we are just evil, we're just bad, we're whatever, bashing ourselves. I think we have been surviving, and we're a product of survival, okay? Let's understand why we have. I want to throw out these 4 drives that people say that's why we have survived. And if we get them in balance, if we do organize around them, then maybe there's a chance. However we're connected or not connected or spiritual or holistic, I'm sorry, I don't care really about that level. But if that helps some people, there are multiple ways of knowing, okay? And what we're doing right now, we're relying on a certain way, but we're sort of bound to that. And I think we need to sort of use it in a more mindful way, maybe. But they're saying there's a drive to acquire, that we need to have food and anything else that we need to survive, and the drive to defend, we need to protect ourselves, right? Those 2 drives we need to have. Current business focus only on drive to acquire. We don't care much about safety at all, right? We're actually threatening people in hire and fire practices. Drive to bond, that is why we have become tribal. That's for good and for bad, right? We can abuse that completely. But if we have it in balance with the drive to acquire and the drive to defend, it has helped us to flourish, okay? It helped us to survive. The drive to comprehend is what makes us so Homo sapiens, okay? And that's how we have multiple ways of knowing. We use religion, we use other ways of understanding the whole, consciousness, whatever we can tap in, but we also have stories. So if we can get that in balance better than we currently have, I think we're already a step forward. Can you wrap it up in 30 seconds? Yeah, I'm going to take a little bit because I think I didn't give, but I'm wrapping it up, okay? So I'm just saying, if we are focusing on more balance, then that might even be a step forward without creating another world, another human, another whatever, something else. Okay, so I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Please thank our panelists.